the way over to the evidence of activities and evidence of outcomes, you'll see two places where it says database. It'll say volunteer database at the top, and then at the bottom it says participant database. Database, we call it a spreadsheet, Google Drive, whatever. That's what we're talking about. When you see volunteer database, that's where we're going to be collecting data on Google Drive about the volunteers. And when you see participant, I think Nikki might call it learner database or learner spreadsheet. That's where you're collecting information, or you're going to enter information about your learners or your participants. So you can see where it maps back to why you're collecting the data. So as we're going through and explaining the pieces of data on there, you should be able to see exactly why we're collecting it and what that information is for, and we're going to tell you how you get that information. So Nikki, do you mind pulling up the Google Drive?
Sure. Yep.
You
Absolutely.
probably would be able to do it quicker than me.
I'm so sorry. On here?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. One moment.
And if you want to go ahead to your email
Yeah.
and find your link from that Nikki sent last night, that would be great. Now, as you're thinking about these spreadsheets, every site has a spreadsheet, but not every member, if you have multiple members, necessarily needs to enter the data. That's going to be something that you will coordinate within your site. You'll figure out, okay, who's responsible for entering this data into this spreadsheet. Maybe you guys want to rotate. One person does it every month. Or it might be better to have one person who's kind of the spreadsheet go-to person that's kind of responsible for getting that data from other people.
Can I ask a question? Can you guys raise your hand if you have used Google Drive and kind of know how it works? I guess so. Let me back opposite that. If you have never used Google Drive and have no idea how it works.
Okay.
What about Google Docs?
It used to be Google Docs. They changed the name.
Yeah, it used to be Google Docs.
So kind of
Okay.
just it'll help me know where to kind of cover
Sure.
while we go through this.
Sure. So just as an overview while she's pulling it up, Google, everybody knows Google, but Google Docs, Google Drive is basically an area of Google where you have your own hard drive, if you will, but it's on the internet. So you can access Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, basically any kind of program that you would have where you create things on your spreadsheet, any type of office type of program, they'll have it on Google Drive. The benefit of having it on Google Drive is that it's shared, so you can see it at your site, but also Nikki has access to it if she has questions about it. And it's real time, multiple people can access it. So if a member is in Charlotte and a member is at a training somewhere else, they can both be looking at the same piece of data at the same time. So that's just kind of what it is. While you're taking a look at it, go ahead and look at it. Look at the document that you pulled up, the spreadsheet that you pulled up. Make sure that you see all of the different headings, all the different columns and rows, because if you look at it, some of you are going to immediately be able to figure out what we're asking you to do.
Okay,
We're walking through it step by
And I
step.
have it pulled up, and keep in mind that these are. Linda didn't.
Did you click on it?
Yeah, let me go see hers.
If you guys don't see the email, if you have a Gmail account, it might be sitting in your drive.
Yeah.
And you don't have a link to it.
Yeah,
So we
and
have
for
to
people
set up
who
a
did have
Gmail?
Gmail, I sent it to your Gmail, not your organization address, just because it's easier to do it in Gmail if you have it. So check your Gmail.
If we don't have a Gmail, we have to set up.
No, you don't. No. You should still be able to click on it.
Well, that's what I checked. Give me a second, I'll get it.
I'm pulling it up. No. What is it? What's coming up?
It takes us right to the Google.
Right. So you need to log into whatever, you have a Google account.
That's what we just said. She said you don't need a Google.
You already have one. So if they don't have a Google account, you have to just make it public.
you guys mind creating those Yeah.
Linda, what's your email address?
Delmartin@connections.org.
Okay.
Thanks. Anybody else having trouble? Read over here's okay.
I've got one, I just can't remember. So let me create, because I don't remember.
I had that when it first.
And then we'll all-
Got it.
So I would have.
Alright, who doesn't have, are you guys the only people that don't have yours open? Is this the only table that doesn't have theirs yet?
Yeah, I'll get it.
Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and get started just giving you an overview of what this is. For some of you, probably you already have it because it's just a spreadsheet. But I do want to make sure everybody's clear on what it is and where this data is going to be coming from. So there's two different types of spreadsheets. So some of you are going to be looking at something different than what's up here. There's one type of spreadsheet for adult sites, and there's another spreadsheet for the K through 12 sites. So the rows and the columns may look a little different depending on what site you are at, but it's basically the same idea. So if you look at the bottom of your Google spreadsheet, there will be 3 tabs: learner data, volunteer data, and volunteer trainings. If you don't see that, raise your hand. All right, so everybody sees that. All right, and so basically I'm going to start with the volunteer data. So if you could click on the volunteer data spreadsheet, because that's the same pretty much for everybody. All right, if you take a look at it, this is where you're going to be entering all of the volunteer information that you're getting at your site. So basically the way I understand it, and you can tell me if your site is a lot different, when volunteers come, they will register. They'll fill out some type of registration form. On the spreadsheet, you'll notice where there's a list of volunteers. Up here on mine, there's probably nobody in your, there might, do you have names in yours already? Pretend names? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll see Nikki, and you'll see the date that she registered. She registered on August the 5th. And then you'll see the next column is volunteer evaluation completed. At the end of the program, they'll have a volunteer evaluation that they'll complete, also known as like a volunteer satisfaction survey. That's just did they do it or not. So yes or no. The next one is who were they recruited by? Were they recruited directly or indirectly through your activities? So the members that the volunteers that every volunteer is going to be entered into the database. We want to know, did you recruit this person? Did another member recruit this person? Or do they have nothing to do with AmeriCorps at all?
If they don't have anything to do with AmeriCorps at all, and they're, which I think in most cases, they shouldn't be in there. They shouldn't be in there. But for a lot of the sites, you will be managing or supporting a large majority of the volunteers, if not all. But that depends on your site, how it's set up. Wondora?
So this might be a crazy question, but we already have like 250 to 300 volunteers. They would not go, these are brand new, starting.
Just the recruited.
Yes.
So just as these are beginning recruited. But as you begin to figure out who the AmeriCorps members are supporting in the organization, if it ends up being they're supporting all 250 when they're doing trainings, then yes, you need to put them in. But you're not counting them as recruiting
Yes.
them. You're managing and supporting. That's the next column.
Okay.
Right.
Does that make sense?
What about so I'm handling all of the volunteer inquiries and telling them how to proceed, but they are finding out about us through existing listings and stuff.
That would be recruited through you, indirectly through you.
Okay.
And so that would be recruited.
What I always tell everybody is don't cut yourself short for the work that you're doing. What we're trying to show, the goal that the Literacy impact that you guys make at your site. So if you start kind of, you are obviously not a sole person that does everything all by yourself. So there will rarely be a case where there is a person who you did absolutely 100% of everything because you have a team of people. What we want to know is what are the things that happened that you were involved in. So if you play a role that you feel is significant in getting them involved, count them. And just have that definition for yourself of what you consider kind of that role. And there'll be people who you will kind of, because some of the stuff will be imperfect at moments. There will be somebody who you'll kind of be like, did I do enough with them? And go with your kind of based on what it generally looks like for your volunteer recruitment. Kind of set a definition for yourself and just stick with it.
Right, and then, I mean, there's the two columns. One is recruited by you or by something that you did. So if you organize an event and they came to it, they may say, well, I didn't come because of your recruitment event. I came anyway. That recruitment event still had some type of influence on them and being recruited. So it's fine to count them for that. And then for managed and supported, if they come to a training that you do, if any kind of materials that you create or that they use, you can also count that. We're really trying to see where AmeriCorps' reach is. How many volunteers did you touch or have some type of connection, indirect or direct with? And that's what we're trying to count.
Even if it's just involvement in corresponding with them and organizing them via email or phone or collecting their volunteer hours, that's support of volunteers. It doesn't solely have to be just trainings. Did you have a question?
So if the volunteer evaluation is completed, if you see a bunch of no's there, are you gonna be like, why are you not? I see 2 no's and 1
Right.
yes, and is there a right or wrong there?
So that's a good question. So the volunteer evaluation is going to be completed at the end of the program year. Some people's volunteers exit in December. So the people that leave in December, we would want them to do it before they leave. Other people don't leave to July or June. Maybe they stay for another year. We still want them to do it at the end of the year. That's not something they only do once. So it really depends on what stage you are in the program. And we would like for them to do it. If we were to survey brand new volunteers to see how satisfied they are, they don't know enough about volunteering at the organization to really get a good sense of it. So your organization can decide when is the best time for us to end our year or our programming for volunteers and just survey everybody. Maybe if you have a big end of the year event, everybody's already there, get them to do it then. Or as people are leaving, you may want to catch them and have them do it then. So it's kind of up to you. So it really depends on the time of year. Now in August, this time next year, if nobody's filled it out, then that's a problem because we've missed a year of data on that. All right, any other questions about this? All right, let me just explain a little bit about how everything is tabulated. So the next section is the contact hours. Nikki, why don't you explain
Sure.
what contact hours means?
Sure. So contact hours, how much are they providing instruction? How many hours are they volunteering per month? In the past, I know that what's been a challenge is, I think Gardy mentioned this, that the volunteers submit their hours oftentimes. They're responsible for submitting their hours. They don't always submit them on time. That's a challenge. So what we're trying to do this year is you're just going to be reporting when you submit. I don't know, you haven't talked about the monthly report yet, but you're tracking all this data in the spreadsheet. Each month, you're going to look at your data and report it for what we have so far. It's all going to be just cumulative. So if in, let's see, September, I realize, oh shoot, in August, this person actually did volunteer more. They just submitted their hours. I can go in and put those, and that's fine. I don't need to go back and change any reporting data for August. I'm just reporting on total cumulative hours of all of my volunteers to date. So each month it's going to grow, right? So you're not just reporting on that month for September. It's going to be August and September. And then in October, August, September, October. And it's just a running total, so that if you have to go back and change and add some hours for volunteers that you missed previously, that's fine. We just need those totals, cumulative totals. Does that make sense?
So Nikki, for this spreadsheet, right now in August, there's 10. But let's say by the time September comes around, there's really 11 hours for August.
Mhm.
How would I reflect that change?
For the next month?
Yes.
Okay,
So
so
would I just
the
leave it at
reason why,
10?
yeah, you could go and put it in there and put 11. We want you to use this as a tracking tool for your purposes. This is not the final reporting document. The final reporting document is your monthly report that you'll submit as a summary of your numbers. Reason being is I can't go into 17 different sites and pull all of this as easily or efficiently. That would take me hours and hours and hours to do that each month. So that if each site just reports, I can pull data, synthesize it, and it's a lot more accurate that way.
Right.
So, if in August I'm doing all my numbers, I'm entering all of it in, that's great, I submit my report. The next month I have to go back and make changes to August. Make changes to that column, that's fine. This is your reporting tool, right? In September, you're still going to reflect that change because you're submitting a cumulative number. You're submitting the 11 hours now plus the 5. Does that make sense?
So for
If you scroll down, there's cumulative totals. Yep. Here, if you zoom out.
And to the right, it also
Yeah.
shows the cumulative.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I even put, that will be the category that you have to submit. There's questions in the monthly report that you have to answer, and it would be total number of volunteer hours to date. Submit this number, right? And we're gonna have that cell locked so nobody can mess it up or anything. That's the number you submit each month.
Right, so
Okay.
when we were talking about the different levels of data collection, this is kind of one of those intermediate steps. So there's all these forms, like, right, the tutors or the volunteers turn in their hours. Well, that would just be a big stack of papers. This is where you're taking all those papers and you're putting it into a spreadsheet so that it's easy to see for Nikki's purposes, but also for your program. You can easily look and say, wow, look at what we did this month. We really need to, up this number a little bit. Maybe we're not meeting our goals, but it's putting it into a spreadsheet just makes it easy to understand, easy to share it with the people that need to share it, needs to be shared with. Are there any questions about this? Yeah.
I do. If we were to make a change, Nikki, would we contact you to give you that heads up?
No, because it will be reflected in that monthly report.
Okay. What about if the monthly report is submitted and then there's a change?
Well, the next month, those hours will still be reflected because we're
Okay.
reporting cumulative numbers.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does now, yeah.
You just need to reflect that change in the spreadsheet, which the member will do.
All right, so let's slide over to the Learna data submission sheet. So this looks very similar to the volunteer sheet. You've got the participant name. Also, you see how it says or code number. Some organizations need to protect the privacy of their members or their participants' names. If so, they should have some kind of ID number, some type of number that the system uses. It's fine to put that in there just so we can keep track of who's who. And then you want to say who, or this is the adult. So what program are they in? AB, ESL, GED. I believe for K through 12, there's not
No.
a differentiation
No.
of types of programs. And so here you want to put the date that they were enrolled,
Disappear.
the date that they completed the program. That's something that I think is going to be a little bit different depending on your program. You should have a definition of how long they need to be in the program to finish it. For some groups, it's August to June because it follows the school year. Others, it's 12 calendar months. So really whatever your program defines as program completion, that's what's going to go in that column that says data program completion. Just put in the date and we'll know what that definition is so
Yep.
we can determine how long they were there.
If you scroll over to, does everybody see that turquoise box
Which
on the right? Scroll over. Okay, so the turquoise box, and there's a little description there. For AmeriCorps purposes, we have to have a minimum of 18 contact hours for learners to be even able to count them as completed a program, right? We put 18 there because that's our baseline. If yours is more, you're going to change that number and put that in. And the reason why we have all of this tracked is if you look where all those lime greens are, the box will turn green when you've reached the number and you could start to consider them as completed. You'll have to think about your program model and if it's appropriate to count them as complete at that point. Sometimes I know with certain programs, maybe it's more appropriate to have them continue, and you don't want to end them yet or evaluate them because you don't think that they will have made quite enough progress by that point. It's different for each program. So you'll have to think critically about, okay, well, I know that they've completed the program based on my program model. Is it appropriate to give them the adult self-eval or the Bader post-test? Okay.
All right, so the spreadsheets are really one of the spaces where program evaluation meets the program, and it's really important for your program to sit down with your site directors, members, to talk about this spreadsheet, the data that we need to collect, and how it makes sense for your organization. Because things like program completion dates, the length of time that students have to be enrolled, when they take the different assessments, all of that's kind of program specific. And you guys need to talk about how you're going to meet the requirements for AmeriCorps, and how that also fits within what you're doing with your program. Okay, that makes sense. All
Does
right.
that make sense? When the box turns green, they can be counted as completed technically?
Right, and you see the it's kind of small, but up here, this person hasn't done any hours, so they're still white.
Yeah.
And the ones that are green, so that means they're good to go, they've completed it. Yes?
I know for us last year, we considered students as completed once we did the post-test. So of course, we have students who have the correct number of hours to be post-tested, but they disappear and we can't get them to come back. So their box would be green because they have enough hours, but they wouldn't be completed because they didn't actually come back for the post-test.
I would is it possible to post-test them if they have been completed? No?
So we don't care ultimately about you guys' post-test, we just care about the adult self-eval.
Right, so but they probably wouldn't have done that either because they left the program without us knowing.
So if you have people who,
If
if that happens a lot at your site, and there's a lot of people that you aren't counting, then it might be something to think about if there's some kind of intermediate point or some other date you can use to just give them the adult self-eval that you guys feel comfortable with, and that works because I know you guys have, and I don't know what that means for you guys programmatically. I don't know what you guys do with those individuals for yourselves. If you just don't count them ever, then, and it's not a ton of people, then don't count them. If what we want you guys to know is that our minimum is that, whatever definition you guys set, that's fine. If you're finding that the definition that you guys set is causing you to remove a lot of people, it's not allowing you to really represent what your program is doing, then it might be a space to think about a different definition.
Right.
Yeah, and we have to report on the impact of the literacy programs for the adults. I mean, and K-12 too, but for the adults particularly, they're ramping it up in terms of what we're reporting. So getting those adult self-evals are particularly important this year. That's where the judgment piece comes in. If you've reached a minimum of 18 contact hours or they have completed a program and you kind of feel like, well, they're probably going to start disappearing and not coming back, give them the adult self-eval. That's where the judgment will come in. Does that make sense, Joy?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, that's always our struggle because for our other funding, we have to count those people that we don't get to post-test, and it does hurt us.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing that's our constant struggle is trying to catch people before they leave.
Before they leave, yeah.
Okay.
And we'll talk more about that.
All right, the other thing that we could do, Nikki, is maybe add another column so that if people do leave, like a comment column next to the student's name. That way, if there is an issue or something like that, they could easily put it in the column. That way, at least we're tracking, like, this person left after a month. That way we know what happened to each person.
Yeah, that's a good
We
idea.
can do that.
Like, I know for us, for example, we're right near a military base, and we get spouses sometimes who are speakers of other languages wanting to learn English, and there's a deployment, and they go away. And it's not because the student lost interest or anything. It was literally, they're moved.
And that's going to happen. I mean, in every single program, there's going to be retention issues and abandonment. That's going to happen.
And I think the more that you can explain, somebody mentioned earlier how quantitative data doesn't tell the full story.
Right.
The more that you can really document just somewhere, maybe if somebody puts it in their member notebook, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, or somewhere, we had 5 spouses leave this year because of the deployment to Afghanistan or wherever.
Right.
That information fills in the story and helps us to know why that data is missing. So that way it doesn't just look like, oh, well, these people just didn't care about what happened to their participants. Actually, this is what happened. We're serving a military population who has this, issue of having to get up and go serve our country, which is really important. So that way, the more we just keep track of not only the hard numbers, but the story of what's going on in the program, the better. So I think the more that programs and members really can be responsible for knowing that story of the program, the richer our evaluation will be. Because really, the hard numbers are what is required by the government, by funding agencies, but as we talked about before, the story is a lot richer than that.
Yep.
And I think that it's really great for members to start kind of capturing that.
And there is space when we submit our report. We have to submit quarterly reports to the commission, and there is space to put a narrative. And so if things like that are happening, an ad column of comments is beneficial for us to say.
Right. And that the comments that you submit also can be analyzed and coded as well, and also submitted as part of the report, because that's data as well. It's not always the preferred kind of data, but it is still information about what's going on in the program. Was there another comment or question? Okay. All right, let's keep moving. We got more to do. All right, so this last one is volunteer trainings. Basically on this side over here, we have the volunteers, and this is the total number of volunteers trained each month. Now, Nikki, can you explain this?
Sure. So what you're going to do is you'll input the names of the volunteers actually should be auto-populated. I have it pulled automatically so that when you enter volunteers into the volunteer data submission sheet, it's automatically going to populate them into that spreadsheet. So you won't have to add them. If you need more columns, just be mindful that when you add stuff, it's going to screw up that formatting. Let me know and I'll go in and make changes and add stuff so it does it correctly. So just shoot me an email when you need more space. So it auto-populates, and then you're just going to say, for instance, Nikki, me, in August, I participated in a training. So I'll put 1. And then Brittany went to an orientation and a training on volunteer recruitment. Okay, so that's 2, right? I might not have any more for months and months. That's fine if I don't. But we just want total number of volunteers that were trained that month. Okay? And then if you see in that blue box with that arrow, it's a total number of volunteers to date. Right? That's the number you submit. Again, just like with the learner data, this is cumulative. So if you have to go back and make an edit, say, oops, I forgot that these people actually did attend a training and my numbers have changed now, that's fine. We're only reporting on cumulative. It's that number right there that you're submitting each month. Okay? And then you scroll down, total number of volunteer trainings, right? So we want the number of trainings, not necessarily, well, this is just a separate reporting tool. Total number of trainings to date. So I'm going to put the topics there. That is something that can't auto-populate because you haven't put it anywhere else. But titles of topics, I've got an orientation, I've got literacy best practices, working with ESL students, and how many of those were given in a month. Again, just like with the number of volunteers who receive training, there might be lots of gaps where you only give the literacy best practices once every semester. So your numbers probably won't be that high.
And I know for like a lot of the academic programs, you guys do a startup training in September and one in January, and
that's fine.
It.
Yeah, and that's fine.
That will be there, and we don't expect to see anything beyond that.
Mm-mm.
For the most part, we kind of know what you guys' programs look like roughly, and so don't stress out if you're like, oh my god, I don't have anything to put in this month. We usually kind of know to expect that, and if we kind of know something about your program and kind of expect that maybe there should have, it's like January, there probably should have been a training, we might call you and be like, we didn't see any trainings in January. And you'll be like, oh yeah, we pushed it to February 1st. And then that will all make sense.
Yeah.
So it should look like what your program looks like. Don't feel like you're missing something or stress out that you'll do something in every month.
Right.
And again, this is a cumulative to date. So you're reporting on that number right there at the bottom.
Right, and again, this is another one of those intermediate data types of things. So as a member, you'll kind of collect maybe agendas or something that says, okay, we did, this particular training this month. Let me put it in the spreadsheet. So I've got like a stack of papers, and I'm going and I'm entering that data into the spreadsheet. So this is something that AmeriCorps is asking you to track, but also you should think about how, as a member, will this help my organization? Why is this data, how is this data useful to us? For example, if we didn't do any trainings this year, but we had huge issues with race and diversity, we can look back and say, okay, we didn't even train on that. Next year, let's do a training on race and diversity and see if we have any changes within our volunteer population. So it helps you think about how you can help really build capacity in your organization as well by having the hard numbers to really show what you did. All right.
Joy, did you have a question?
Yeah, can we go back to the learner one?
Mhm.
I have a question, because in all these you say that you're just tracking the cumulative
Mhm.
hours. So on these spreadsheets where you're tracking by month, is that just a help?
Yes, that's
So
just,
if-
yeah.
If our regular database that we use, it's easier for us to just go ahead and pull their cumulative,
Mm-hmm.
can we just enter a cumulative?
We actually,
We need monthly totals,
Okay.
because that's an AmeriCorps. They want to see, and that is something for you guys to know, and if people have, they're dense documents, which is why we're not showing you guys like the national performance measure explanation. Keeping this sort of tracking information is one of the minimum requirements of the data collection, and so we just have to be able to see by month. We can't fix that, just kind of numbers out of.
and those performance measures are in their folder.
Yeah, you guys have them, they're
Yeah.
really dense, they're in evaluator speak, but if you like that kind of thing, we encourage you to read them.
Yeah, definitely. It's actually, if you're interested in this kind of thing, it would be a worthwhile read so you can see what they require and then how that translates into what people actually have to do.
You might
So
want to
if
show
you're interested.
quickly the K-12 one for
Okay.
the Bader. It doesn't look terribly different. If you just go back one more.
Sorry, here.
Yeah.
And while they're pulling that up, just a side note, we just noticed over here, they had opened the Google Doc in Explorer, in Internet Explorer, and it wasn't working right. So
Firefox.
Google, and because Google and Microsoft have their lovely battle between each other, more and more Google Drive is looking worse and worse in Explorer. So if you're having technical difficulties with it, try switching to Chrome or to Mozilla Firefox, and I can guarantee you it'll work better. One of those sad realities.
So just real quick, this is the K through 12 spreadsheet. This is how it looks. It collects slightly different data, but it follows the same kind of pattern and structure. And we'll talk more about what that Bader test is and how it's done a little bit later. Okay? All right, let's keep moving because we're
Okay. Yes. All right. Yes. Thank you. That's a good point.
All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about where this data that we're entering on the spreadsheets comes from. So as we mentioned, on your logic model, there's two big goals for AmeriCorps. There's volunteer management, the volunteer piece, and then there's literacy/skills improvement. Okay. So under goal 1, volunteer management data collection items. Now we're going to talk about that. I believe that's the first horizontal bar on your logic models. And we're going to go through each of the different pieces of that. I'm going to ask Nikki to talk about the volunteer retention and recruitment plan because you've got to have the plan in place. Once you have the plan in place, then the data that we collect will make a little bit more sense. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Nikki.
Sure. In your folders, or your binders, each site has a binder, right? And this will be a share, if there's multiple members at a site, it will be shared.
Will we need this website up anymore?
I don't, yeah.
We'll need it a little bit later, but we can set it to the side.
Yeah. All right, so pull out the volunteer retention and recruitment plan. So a piece of our evaluation plan is for the members in conjunction with their site supervisors to take a look at the currently existing volunteer recruitment plan, right, and management plan. We have an assessment, a member volunteer management assessment, and it's just a quick survey that we'll ask you to do in conjunction with your site supervisors to assess your organization, right? The reason why we're asking you to do this with your site supervisor or some of the other folks at your organization is because you haven't been there long enough to know what they need. And so the site supervisors will have a much better idea of what's already existing, what's working well, what do they want you to focus on improving this year. So what we've created is this, once you do the document, or once you do the assessment with your site supervisor anytime in the next week or two, that would be great. Take a look at this volunteer recruitment and retention plan, one per site, right? You'll be doing this as a group if there's multiple people. So the initial assessment is step one. You're going to complete the volunteer management assessment alongside your site supervisor, and then using your responses from that, you're going to identify key areas of improvement for your site. The second step is to develop a plan to execute, right? And you're going to execute that plan by picking any of the following pieces to improve. So based on what you find the areas of improvement, you might end up developing and or improving written volunteer recruitment plans. Or you might improve volunteer supervision practices. Or you might create a system to match volunteers to appropriate roles. Or improve that system. Or develop regular recognition volunteer activities. You have to pick at least 3 of those areas to either develop or improve. And then the step 3 is just executing, right? Executing that plan. What steps are you going to take to make that happen? Document your efforts. So some of that will be, you've got different tabs, agendas from trainings, right? So that's evidence of executing a plan if you are doing volunteer trainings, things like that. Sign-ins, right? Volunteer sign-ins. Any other type of supporting documents that you might have that would be evidence of you executing this plan. It could be the written volunteer recruitment plan that you create, or the improved one that you did. So those would all be supporting documents, and that would go under your supporting document tab as evidence. So then the step 4, the final step, will be to assess the effectiveness of that plan. What you're going to do is your site supervisor is going to complete that survey, the site supervisor volunteer management survey. It's the end of year 1. It's the same thing that was at the beginning, but it's just a post-test to see improvement, to see what was the perceived impact of these changes that you have made, the improvements, and your execution of the plan. The next couple pages are just your space to identify the areas of improvement with your site supervisor. And then the second step, volunteer recruitment and retention plan, you're going to actually lay out your plan to identify areas of improvement, and then the strategies, which are selected from that list, right? You're going to correspond them with at least 3 strategies for improvement. And then the last, second to last page is executing your plan, strategies for improvement, and then what documentation do you have to show that you've done that, right? And you're just going to list it. And then lastly, you're assessing it. So the strategies that you use, assessment of effectiveness, and then suggestions for continued improvement. Those suggestions for continued improvement, I would encourage you to do that with your site supervisor too, because that will play a role in what they might like to see next year. If something was really effective, what might they either build upon or expand maybe for next year? So this will be used as a tool for continuing development and growth with volunteers at your site. Okay. So this should be used truly to help support your organization that you're working with as well. So it's not just some random assignment that we're giving you to do extra work.
So site supervisors, all of you probably, the ones that have been around for a while, are noticing this is pretty new. There's always been a component that they're supposed to be working to improve this. it's never been a measured aspect of their job. This year, this has actually become capacity building for nonprofits became one of the AmeriCorps priorities, which is why we decided this is something that we've always kind of done a little bit of, and so now we're gonna go ahead and try and measure it. So for this to work, you guys really are gonna have to work with your members really closely, because obviously you want them spending time on things that are effective for your program, and you guys are the ones that know what your program is and looks like and how it functions. So this is gonna be a space where definitely like you guys helping them develop, having some input in those plans and how they're developed will make them all the more successful. So as much as you guys have time and the ability to, because it'll also, it should help. It should help when you guys come out of, I mean, volunteer management is one of those things that tends to always be, like we all do it, but it's usually like, who's doing it? The
It's a little bit
it takes-
nebulous.
Yeah, the time it takes to do it well in an organized way is a challenge. So you use this to your advantage to really get your AmeriCorps members to really put some structure around that in a way that's beneficial to your site.
And what I mentioned yesterday to the members is this is a skill building process for this year. After this year, the members, you will walk away with this vast knowledge of data assessment, program evaluation, that is a highly marketable skill. Creating and executing a volunteer recruitment, management, retention plan, those are all highly marketable skills. So use this to your advantage professionally.
All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about the same plan, but from a program evaluation perspective. So basically, what you guys have been asked to do is to do a project or kind of create your own miniature program. And this program is going to be to help build volunteer capacity in your particular site. Now, I think it was you that mentioned before, when you're evaluating something, it's a good idea to figure out what's going on first before you jump in and have this wonderful program idea. For example, your organization may already have a wonderful volunteer recognition program. So maybe that's not what you need to do. But there's probably something that you can build onto your organization with to help them with volunteer management. And again, my links aren't working, so I'm going to have to pull up the survey in another way. So give me just a second to do that.
Technology.
I don't think UNC
Makes
likes
life
me
easy.
anymore. It worked fine when I was a student, but now it's like, nope, it won't let me in. So this is an electronic survey, and actually we have copies, so I can pass those out. Or maybe we don't.
Yeah, we do. Which one?
You can go ahead and pass out the volunteer satisfaction and, yeah, that's it for now.
Oh yeah, that one we don't have. You want me to go ahead and pass them out?
Just the volunteer ones. All right, so what you're going to get from Nikki, we'll send this out, is a link to a survey, and we call it an assessment. Basically what you're doing in this assessment is called the Literacy Corps Member Site Volunteer Management Assessment. You know how we just said that you need to create a kind of a project or a program where you're really helping to build volunteer capacity? You want to figure out what the needs are first. As I mentioned, you don't want to just create something where there's not really a need for it. So we will give you the link to this particular survey. You'll want to take it with your site supervisor. Let me make it a little bit bigger so we can see it. And basically, it's going to go through different aspects of, let me make it even bigger. It's still kind of small.
It's pretty good on this report.
Is it? Okay.
That screen's just not very good.
Okay. So basically, these are different aspects of a volunteer management program. So these are things that you'll want to sit down with your site supervisor and think about, how well is this being implemented? Is it not being implemented at all? That means they're not doing this at all here. Partially implemented but needs improvement. And then the last one, it's being implemented well. So for example, if you talk to your site supervisor and they say, you know what, our volunteers already know about the benefits of volunteering. That's something that we're already doing and we don't need any more of. We'd want to rate that really high on the scale, which is all the way at the right. But maybe that for B, there's not a system for matching volunteers to appropriate roles. Maybe volunteers are just kind of placed as they are. One comes in, they get matched here without really looking to see what their skill set is. Maybe you can develop a system to really match volunteers based on what their interests are and their skill set. So you could put not implemented at all, right? So that might be an area that you would want to work on. Volunteer motivation. Maybe the program has something in place to help motivate their volunteers, but maybe it needs a little bit of improvement. You could put partially implemented. Basically, this is kind of like a pre-assessment or pre-test to figure out what's going on in the organization. How can I help? So when you're creating your volunteer management plan, you're going to finish this, and you're going to go through, and you're going to go to your site supervisor as a team and say, hey, here are 3 things that we rated pretty low that we want to work on. And then your site supervisor is going to say, yeah, but number 1's not really important to me, but number 2 and number 3 and number 4 really are. So I want you to work on those things. Then you'll develop a plan for how to implement that. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the first step. You'll do this relatively soon, so you can go ahead and get started on creating the plan. It's almost like if you were a teacher, you pre-test your students to see what they need to learn before you go in and start doing stuff, because they might already know it. Yep.
So you're gonna send us that?
I will send you the link, but I will also put it on the website. I'll put all of these documents and things on the website under resources so that you'll also have access to it there. So say you lose the link and for whatever reason it's not in your email anymore,
Right.
it will be up there as well.
Okay. Sounds good. And this may be something also that you want to print out and keep a copy of it in your volunteer notebook. As Nikki mentioned, this is a marketable skill set that employers need and want, being able to assess a problem or a challenge and figure out a plan as to how to fix that problem or fix that challenge, and then being able to prove with evidence that you actually did something to affect it. So make sure you're keeping track of all this, not just for us, but also for your benefit at the end of your year as well. All right, so that's the first piece of it. The second assessment that goes with the volunteer management goal is the volunteer satisfaction survey. At the end of the year, you want to survey your volunteers to see if all the stuff that you were doing with them, for them, actually was useful or not. And so on your table, you have a written or a piece of paper survey, the old-fashioned way, and it has basically what the questions that we would like for you to ask your volunteers. Your site may have other things that they need to know from volunteers. Your site may already have this survey or have a similar survey where you're asking your volunteers, how are things going? If your site already has a survey, there's no need to do 2 surveys. What we would ask you to do is go through and make sure that all of the questions that we have are somewhere on that survey or somewhere that are similar. That way we can use that data that you've already collected. It may be that you just stick this box on the back, and we can give you an electronic copy of this so that you can modify that survey. But what we need from you are the answers to these questions about your volunteers. But we don't want to duplicate efforts. Does that make sense? All right, so that's one way that we'll see how effective it was, right? So you do something, you ask the people that were involved, hey, how did it go? How can we improve on it? And then the other way that we're going to find out if it was effective or not is we're going to ask the site supervisors. They'll be able to say, okay, this is where we were at the beginning of the year. This is where we are now at the end of the year. How did it go? How did the trainings that Megan and Nikki do, Megan and Nikki do with the members, were they actually effective or not? Were members able to come in and do what we needed to do? Now that's not an evaluation to say, well, the members weren't doing what they were supposed to do. It really is an evaluation of Scale and AmeriCorps to see what they can do as a program to really improve their services. So it's all about really trying to figure out how can these different groups work together to really improve for the benefit of the populations that you're serving. So I'll just real quickly show the site supervisor survey so you'll have an idea of what that looks like. Just go back. Oh, Qualtrics. All right. I've got so many surveys on here. Let's see. Here we go. And it looks similar to that first assessment. Actually, the questions or the items are exactly the same, except what we're doing, instead of just saying, was it implemented or not implemented, we're asking, how was this at the beginning of the year? How much was it implemented? And then at the end of the year, how much has it improved? So you're looking from beginning to end to see, did it actually have an effect on these particular things? And then the other thing that I will add to this is I will add a not applicable column, because maybe the member didn't even work on that, so it wouldn't be applicable. So I'll go back and I'll put that in. All right, so that's goal number 1. All right, goal number 2 is improving literacy skills and other data collection items. So this is another large component of, we're actually gonna have to split up to talk about K through 12 and adult evaluation. So I think maybe we should take a short break.
Yeah.
So do we need 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
Up to the group, 5 or 10.
5 or 10.
10.
All right, so we'll come
10 it
back at 10:40.